No one has ever wintered on the Amery Ice Shelf before, but there's no other way we can collect the information we need. Six months ago, we said goodbye to the outside world. Max Corrie, a surveyor, had been selected to lead the party. He'd previously spent a year in Antarctica at Mawson. Julian Sansom from London, the expedition's doctor, his first trip to Antarctica. Neville Collins, diesel engineer. This was his fourth trip. Alan Nichols, an electronics engineer and our radio operator, his first trip. 4 strangers, none of us ice scientists, none of us with much idea of what we were walking into. Conditions much more severe than anyone had anticipated. We were to spend 6 months living under the shelf like ice-bound moles. The Amery troglodytes, they called us in Antarctica, the cave dwellers. The Amery Ice Shelf is 350 meters thick, the accumulation of centuries of snowfalls. Snow falling far inland is compressed into solid ice under the force of its own weight and carried forward by the Lambert Glacier, the largest glacier in the world. Squeezed between the Prince Charles Mountains and the Mawson Escarpment, it flows over a large bay, bridging its sides to form a great shelf 140 miles wide over the sea, with sheer cliffs rising 120 feet out of the water. Four men living inside a mobile 45,000 square kilometer ice block. Even before the winter had begun, a solid wall of drift snow was burying our caravans. We constructed a tunnel between our 2 caravans and let the snow cover us completely. Later, we extended the tunnel to the storeroom and ablutions block. We lived 2 to a caravan, with 1 caravan doubling as extra storage space and the other as kitchen and radio room. The extreme conditions forced us under the ice, but now with our heating system, we're better off down here than on the surface. We never have to go outside except when we're working. There are problems like condensation from cooking, but we've solved this almost completely by using a pressure cooker. We can even take a shower, although it means hours of time spent heating buckets of ice over the stove. We have enough supplies for 3 years, and we won't starve. High point of our day is the radio call to Mawson, 300 miles away. Several times we've lost contact for a week, and then you start wondering if the outside world exists anymore. We tried hard to get along, and there's been little friction, but we can never really relax. The cramped conditions and the monotony of the same faces don't lend themselves to a party atmosphere. The traditional midwinter celebration in Antarctica can run for a couple of days. Ours was very subdued. We withdraw into our hobbies. Alan builds radio sets. Neville and Sam play chess. Max writes computer programs. We also brought 100 books, paperbacks, to save weight. But keeping down to the absolute minimum, we still had 70 tons of supplies and equipment to unload. We landed at Sandefjord Bay, the first time this had been attempted. The ice is treacherous, constantly eroded by the sea, but it was the only possible place. A sudden storm would threaten the ship and cause us to lose irreplaceable equipment. In any case, we had to drag everything 2 miles in from the edge in case the ice started to disintegrate. Heavy equipment would be dragged into the campsite, avoiding the deep crevasses along the way. Helicopters would fly in the rest. We unloaded in 24 hours. The only casualty was one of our 2 Nodwell tracked vehicles with differential trouble. Shortly after the ship pulled out, the area we'd been working on broke away and drifted out to sea. At the base camp, we lived in tents until the caravans arrived. Winds averaged 20 miles an hour, not 2 as we'd expected, and deep drifts of snow were already piling up. Digging out equipment kept us busy, but we set up the automatic weather station, which had been one of our main reasons for coming. When the caravans came, we finished our preparations for winter. We stowed all our food and other supplies in a pit we'd dug in the ice, not realizing that continual blizzards and only a couple of hours of light every day would keep us underground most of the winter. We work as much as we can in those hours. Conditions will not permit surveying, so we concentrate on our other major task, drilling into the ice with a Krell thermal drill. Most of our cores shatter because they are suddenly chilled by 30 or 40 degrees when they hit the cold air at the surface. The Americans designed this drill for their underground station, where the temperature is kept at a steady minus 12 degrees Celsius. The cores will be taken back to Melbourne for examination by glaciologists. They can tell us the history and origins of the shelf. The Amery ice is arranged in chronological layers which have originated in various ways. Some flowed from far inland, some was deposited as snow. The bottom layer was probably frozen from the sea. Some of our cores were frozen more than 1,000 years ago. The microscope reveals the crystalline structure of the ice, its density, and its reaction to stress. From what has happened in the past, we can get some idea of what may happen in the future, whether the ice is increasing or decreasing, for example, and how this will affect the rest of the world. But such speculations are remote, as we actually struggle to get the ice out. Melted ice from the drill provides us with water for cooking and drinking. It helps to have a container ready to slide the ice straight in. but we're only able to keep about a third of what we're bringing up. Still, despite the conditions and the idiosyncrasies of the drill, we go a little deeper every day. Another blizzard. Work must be abandoned. We withdraw into our private worlds, daydream, think about family and friends and that other world we left behind us on a wharf in Melbourne. Having drilled more than 1,000 feet into the ice, we're nearing the end of the operation. It's ironic that we've developed an affection for something that it's cost us so much effort and frustration. In spite of all the difficulties, work is what keeps you going in these circumstances. When pressure finally causes the drill to stick, we have the satisfaction of more than 3 tons of ice to show for our winter's work. It's probably been hardest for Sam because he hasn't had much opportunity to practice as a doctor. We all had our appendixes out before we came, and we've had no major illnesses. There was some carbon monoxide poisoning before the tunnel was properly ventilated, but that's all. Spring, improved weather, longer days. At last, we were able to emerge from our long hibernation. It took us a month to prepare for the survey, mainly because all our fuel, supplies, and equipment were buried and frozen in. Previous parties coming overland from Mawson had surveyed the shelf in the summers of 62, 63, and 64, but their work had been incomplete because of lack of time. This was why we spent the winter here, to have plenty of time for a complete survey. The previous parties had placed markers over the shelf in the form of a grid. One of our jobs was to resurvey the markers and replace them where necessary. By comparing our measurements with those earlier surveys, we'd be able to compute the rate at which the shelf is moving. Along with our accurate measurements of the ice profile, this gives us information about the dispersion of the Antarctic ice and its possible effects on the level and temperature of the world's oceans. We completed our preparations and left camp at the end of October. 30 miles from camp, our remaining nodwell broke down. Neville and Alan had to go back for the snow track, which we'd borrowed from Mawson to replace the first nodwell. We stopped only for coffee, working 14 or 15 hours at a stretch, 7 days a week. Sheer heaven after the long months of inactivity underground. As the snow track carried much less than the nodwell, we had to run a shuttle service, bringing survey poles and extra fuel for the motorized toboggans. Many of the bamboo markers erected by previous parties had been buried. We replaced them with sections of 2-inch diameter pipe fitted together into 30 feet lengths. Prince Charles Mountains mark the edge of the shelf and the extent of our survey. We started working back, satisfied with what we'd accomplished. We'd identified most of the old grids. We completed the work and arrived back at the base camp in time for Christmas. Three months previously, we said we'd leave for the coast on Boxing Day, and so we did, completing the survey work along the way. At the front, a disappointment. Sea ice stretched out for 20 miles and no sign of our ship, the Nala Dan. But the next day, a chopper came in to pick us up. We flew the cores out and brought back almost all our equipment, including the fiberglass caravans. We even repaired the Nodwells and drove them out. Few regrets about leaving. Later we'd be grateful for having had a unique experience, but we all swore we'd never do it again. There was only one thought in our minds now. The Amery troglodytes were going home.